So I've had the iPhone 17 since launch day, but I also picked up and was very excited about the iPhone Air. When this phone came out, I initially got in the sky blue, but went with the sleek black color. I returned it for the sleek black color. And I want to talk about my honest long-term review. Now that these phones have been out quite some time, we're already looking forward to 18 Pro and Pro Max. We're also looking forward to iPhone Fold and maybe an iPhone Air 2 the following spring. So let's see what happens here, and let's talk about what I've experienced. And we'll talk first thing about the hand feel versus the pocket reality. The iPhone 17 simply feels like a tool made for human beings. Let's just be real. This phone just feels really good in the hand. It feels essentially like it was just designed perfectly to have a nice weight. You could feel it in your pocket, but not too heavy. Good size where you can reach things, a kind of a universal size I think a lot of people can handle without it feeling too big. It digs into the palms a little bit, but nothing like some other phones out there with more pointy corners, anything like that. But the iPhone Air is like a design piece, a museum piece, if you will. It's a beautiful kit right here. I feel like you could literally put this in a museum and you could put a little placard that says the thinnest iPhone ever made by Apple Incorporated. Like, this kind of looks just like a stunner, a showstopper. But over this long-term experience, it's actually felt kind of like a phantom phone. What I mean by that, basically weightless. When I'm using the iPhone Air, I can't even feel this thing in my pocket. Like, I'm like, you know that thing where you're like digging around, where's my phone? Where's my phone? You're panicking a little. You thought you lost all your data on your phone that has all your data on it. I get that feeling sometimes with this. But one saving grace of it is that it is pretty heavy and it's pretty wide. So if you have like shorts on, you'll probably still feel it in the pocket. The iPhone Air, though, also because it's so thin here, it feels pretty slippery sometimes. Like, you could drop it. But one saving grace of it is that the titanium edges are polished, so it gives it a little more grip. Although I do feel it kind of digging in the palm. And on the topic of the size of the display, it's actually like riding the edge of like too big for this. I actually think this would have been better in like a 6-inch to 6.1-inch size with this design. It would have been super sleek, and maybe even a smaller phone like a 5.8. This would have been insanely cool. But at this size, it is iPhone XS Max size right here, 6.5-inch display. And I think at first it's going to feel a little more compact if you're coming from a Max or something like that, and still very manageable. But the reality is it's still a big display. The phone feels like a Max iPhone display. It's wide, it's tall, it's large. And while not as large as a 6.9, which is like ridiculous large on the Max and stuff like that, it's still a big display by comparison to the iPhone 17. So the iPhone 17 remains the everyone phone, the kind of universal size 6.3 that kind of just works. So I would say overall, I do find the iPhone 17, the display just more comfortable, but I do like the size and looks of the iPhone Air's display. It feels like they're cramming as big a display as they can into this kind of phone form factor. So it feels like you're getting a lot of value for money there, but for some people, it's just simply going to be too big. The iPhone Air has been kind of a half and half phone to me. What I mean by that, well, in terms of the build, it's kind of like super nice in terms of the titanium on the edges. It reminds you it's premium. One of the reasons I went with the black is because I like the camera plateau up here. The color is the black just shines and matches these edges really nicely, whereas they're a little bit more subdued on the other colors. And I also like the black Apple logo. It just looks super classy and sleek here. But the phone itself is lighter weight than some of the other iPhones, so it doesn't feel quite as substantial as like a Max or something like that, but at least the titanium makes up for it. Now on iPhone 17, it doesn't feel super premium either. It just feels like a standard premium aluminum phone. So it does the job, but I think it's really best for most people though, just because it kind of gives you not a cheap feel, but not like an overly high-end feel as well. So it just kind of works for most folks. Long term, I found that the iPhone 17 has slightly better thermals. It just has a thicker like phone body, I think, to disperse a little bit of heat, so it kind of spreads across it more. Also, it is a aluminum chassis here, so that helps a bit as well. The iPhone Air can get pretty toasty up in the camera plateau area. They are housing processors and things up there, so up in this area around here, I would say like around this little visible thing I'm drawing right here, that's kind of like where I felt the heat a lot with this phone. You also notice it a lot during setup as it's kind of like downloading everything. But for the most part, for most daily use, it doesn't get too hot. But when you push this phone, unlike the Maxes, it doesn't have those thermal efficiencies of the Pro and Pro Max. these phones still kind of feel like iPhone 16, 15 phones, how those phones got a little bit warm and toasty when you were pushing the phone. The 17 is still not as good as the Pro. You can feel them thermals, you can feel that heat, I found, but it's just kind of like dispersed better to me. So I've experienced a better thermal efficiency on the 17 when we compare these two. One thing that's also been better on the iPhone 17 has been the speakers. We do have dual speakers, one at the bottom and then one up at the top. It's more useful to me, I would say, in terms of the like speakerphone calls and, when we're listening to music, when you prop down a song and it's playing in front of a lot of folks and stuff, you want to share that with your peoples around you. This sounds a little bit better. This one's a little more tinier because it's one. Still sounds very good, but it just sounds like it's coming out of one area. It just doesn't feel very high end. Just because most iPhones over the past several years have come out both speakers, so I don't like that with the Air. I want to have two speakers on this phone. It would just make it feel a little bit more premium. But I understand why they could only fit one in here at the same time. I would go with the iPhone 17 for the speakers themselves. The next thing I want to talk about here is bigger doesn't always mean better. I'd say the Air is a better display overall, though, because it just kind of like with this super thin bezel with this bigger screen, it just kind of feels like a super premium liquid retina. I don't know. It's just beautiful. You got to see it in person. It's just stunning. And it feels like you're holding almost all glass right there. Whereas the thickness of this makes it feel more like a standard phone. But I do like the iPhone 17 because it's giving you like the same nits, kind of like the same color accuracy. And so while technically the hardware is about the same, I found the iPhone Air to just look a little bit nicer just due to the large, display with kind of like holding that super thin body. It just feels like you're just holding a sheet of glass with just a little bit of weight to it. Very, very nice experience. I think it's getting closer to that like wraparound display. This is like a head in that direction where it's going to get very thin and maybe the glass will wrap around in the future. Overall, though, displays have been excellent on both. I want to talk about something on the back of the phones, the plateau versus the smooth back. So on the plateau, I found just like on a Google Pixel with the iPhone Air, you can kind of rest your finger right there to kind of give you a little bit of grip on the phone. I found myself doing that, just kind of like using this as a ledge to hold my finger on there. Kind of like that. I do kind of like that. For some people, if they don't have long fingers or a big hand, that might not even be a thing. But what you feel is top heaviness on this phone. Like it feels like it's kind of leaning like that way. And so when you're holding it here, you can get a little bit of pinky fatigue down here, a little bit of hand fatigue down here because the phone is like, you could feel the weight at the top pushing forward a little bit. So I hold the iPhone Air in my experience like kind of like this instead of more like this. Some people hold phones like this, but this one feels a little top heavy. What I do find impressive though is that they were able to cram this camera control into the iPhone Air. One thing about it though is because it's so small, I've experienced having to kind of like, make sure I actually hit that button a little bit more. It's not as easy to feel out as the iPhone 17. So that's something a lot like the Z Fold 7 where you're trying to click the fingerprint sensor and it's like really skinny and stuff. You got to maybe click it a couple times. Same thing here with the iPhone Air and camera control. Whereas with the iPhone 17, you can see right there, it's just so easy to feel this thing out. I almost never miss that right there when I'm using it. I usually just use this as a camera launch button. It just makes total sense. But holding the iPhone 17 on the back feels like your standard iPhone affair. I feel like I'm holding a lot more smooth aluminum and I'm just kind of barely brushing off onto the camera. So I do kind of prefer the way it feels in the back of the iPhone 17. But the iPhone Air also feels like a very, very premium status piece. It really does. Now, when it comes to battery life, the iPhone 17 has been noticeably better than the Air in terms of, it has a bigger capacity, but in reality, it has lasted about an hour and a half to 2 hours longer for me. That is a pretty big difference. And I found myself actually needing to put on low power mode to get that kind of longevity I like on the iPhone Air. However, a lot of people are going to say, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. There's plenty of videos showing that the phone gets through the day. When I compare this to phones with bigger batteries on the iPhone side, especially the 17 series, this one just finishes the day with less. Unless I'm using low power mode, then it lasts a little bit longer. But how I would sum this up is I would finish the day with like 45%-ish on the Pro, like 53% on the iPhone Max. This one I'm at like 12 to 16% by the end of the day. So it's pushing a little closer than comfort for me on the iPhone Air. But for most people, putting this phone on CarPlay starts charging your phone if you put it in the wired CarPlay. If you put this phone on a wireless charger in your car, that's also charging it on the way to work. If you're like at home and you're plugging it in as you go out there throughout your day, it's never going to be a problem. And you could just get a battery pack if you're traveling, but if people, you like a lot of battery backup, this one is worse to me than the iPhone 17. However, the iPhone 17 is kind of like as good as like an older iPhone Pro, 16 Pro-ish around there. So it's pretty substantially better in my experience, but neither of these are like 2+ day phones unless you're just an extremely light user. One thing about the iPhone 17 though is that it only has 8 GB of RAM. The reality though is with the A19 chip, give this kind of like a MacBook Neo type of feel. Just because it has 8 gigs of RAM doesn't mean it's not going to perform. This thing performs extremely well, and it performs exactly like a phone you will want to buy for the next 5 years. And that's mostly down to Apple's efficiency with the optimization of hardware and software. But the real thing that has really been enjoyable is the promotion. I literally am so happy this is here. This is like, I could talk about this till the sun goes down, because the truth of the matter is that it's made a massive difference. I feel like I'm using a pro iPhone now, and that's just something I could never say about base models before. And the iPhone 17 can also run games like Destiny Rising, Call of Duty Mobile, all these games nearly as good as the Pro. So I mean, at this point, you can say, do you really even need a Pro? At this point, you're getting it for battery. You're getting it because it has the better cameras. That's the bottom line. Performance on the Air has actually been really good as well, with 12 gigs of RAM, Apple A19 Pro chip. However, this phone does throttle a bit compared to the Pro Max. So if you are pushing this phone a little harder, I have found a little bit more stuttering happening on this phone than the iPhone 17. I don't know why. It has the better chip. I don't know if it's because they're like throttling it somewhat when I'm pushing the phone, but I've seen it chop a little bit more. I don't understand that, but at the same time, it still has the better chip. It has the better RAM. So I think long term, I'm still going with the Air. But generally, it performs really good. It's got that ProMotion display, and it just doesn't have the same level of breathing room in terms of the body. It's just the sacrifice you make. So performance-wise, for daily use, I'd pick the 17. For long-term headroom, if you're going to keep the phone a long time, I'd probably go with the Air here, just because it has that better RAM to support future Apple Intelligence. The iPhone Air is really just a status symbol, guys. That's what it is to me. It's saying I have a new cool iPhone here with this device. And the truth is that it's also for people who are like, I'm tired of these heavy phones. Like it can also be a great utility for those people who are just sick of the heavy phone weighing down their pocket. You got to think about the thinness too. Like if you got like a compact car or whatever, you got a slim cubby hole, this thing, to put your phone in, this thing could slide in a lot of places very easily. One thing I don't like though is that sometimes it's so light, I barely even know it's in my pocket. But that's not like that's like petty complaint right there. And what I'm saying is that some people might prefer a substantial feel, and the 17 has a little bit more of a substantial feel to it. It's got a little bit of heft to it, which some people will like. I think that the $799 and $999 difference though is pretty steep. So we're looking at over $1,000. This one, you could get this phone, you can get a case, screen protector, all that jazz, still under the price of a iPhone Air, and objectively has the better camera systems, which we didn't elaborate on too much. I didn't really feel to, because really all we're talking about is a ultra wide improvement. That's about it. You just have an ultra wide. So if you need the ultra wide, that's the main upgrade here. Front facing cameras are about the same on both. They both have this super nice wide experience. And so I'm just going to recommend the 17 here long term for like 95% of users. If you're in that crowd that wants the nicest, like looking different feel of an iPhone, and you're okay with a single camera, you like that sleek minimal look, you want this sleek size and stuff like that, you're gonna really like this one a lot. But it really feels like a novelty piece. It doesn't feel like the phone they made for everyone. It feels like the phone they made for enthusiasts, let's just put it that way. So that's how I feel about it after about 6. So that's how I feel about it long term. That's my long term experience with both phones. If you found the video helpful, entertaining, informing, do me a favor, click that like button for me. Subscribe if you haven't already. And if you like this video, you might actually like this video as well. I'll catch you on the next episode. Nick here. Be sure to be well, and peace.